everybody. So what I want to show you guys today is how to do a hand warmer mug. I'm going to show you that using some different textures and some things like that. Another word for this, if you were looking online, is a pocket mug. It's actually a really simple process. So I'm going to show you how I do it. First, I'm going to roll a slab. I would say the slab should be about 1/4 of an inch thick, not too thick. And then I'm going to spend some time compressing this slab, going in different directions so that it stays nice and strong for me in the process. So I'm going to do it on both sides before I get started. And I took a pretty good sized chunk of clay off of my block to do this. So I didn't really weigh it, but I would say off the block at least 2 inches worth. Better to have more than what you think you need. All right, and then before I cut my shape, the form for the mug, what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and roll my texture in first, because then I will know what I'm working with. And then I also won't have to worry about distorting any of the rectangle that I cut. So I'm going to roll this texture in. Feel free to use any of the lace, flat textures, or stamps. So I want to press it hard enough in that I actually really see this texture through it. So I'm going to spend a minute really pressing this in so that I see the clay kind of squish up through the texture. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now that I have my texture in here, now I can go ahead and measure out how much I need for my mug. All right, so I'm going to make this 14 inches long and about 5.5 inches tall. So my first cut is going to be up here, and I'm just going to go ahead, let's see here. I'll go ahead and start by cutting my top chunk here. I'm not going to do all the measuring quite yet, but I'm just going to go ahead and make a flat side first. Okay, so I've got my flat edge here. And then what I want to do next is I actually want to measure down on both ends 5.5 inches. So I'm going to mark a 5.5 inch dot right there. And the 5.5 inch dot right there. And then I'll cut the bottom. Okay. Okay, I'm going to do one more 5.5 inch dot here, just so I get it mostly straight. Okay. All right, set that aside. I'll probably use those for the bottom. All right, and now what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and start by cutting one side straight up and down. All right, and then I'm going to do 14 inches long. So my rulers are only 12 inches, so I'm just going to make little marks so that I can get my 14 inches. Okay, I'll make a little mark there, and then repeat the same process on the top. Okay, so one option that you have is to cut straight, which would give the pocket that your fingers are going to go in a little bit more of, it'll kind of just flare open. Another option that you have is to actually cut it on a little bit of a curve. If you want to do that, what I would recommend is using one of the round forms. Leave everything. Is using one of the round forms that I have, and if I mark where my 14 inches are, I can just put this right on the edge here and then trace around that. Okay, so it'll give me a nice curve to work with. All right, so, but you don't have to have it curved. I'll just go ahead and keep that so you can kind of see what it looks like. All right, so, and then we're gonna go ahead and form this. So because, let's see, I'm right-handed, right? So if you are left-handed, you wanna keep that into consideration with how you have the curved side. If you are a left-handed person, right, you'd want to make sure that where that curve is, you can get your left hand in there. So you want to make sure that you've got that first, okay? And then I'm going to overlap the walls so that I've got this pocket right here for my hands to go in. And you can absolutely shrink this to fit your hands better. Obviously remembering that it's going to shrink in. So right now it looks really, really large, but it will shrink significantly. So, and you can also go shorter than that, right? If that feels like that's just gonna be way, way, way too big, feel free to kind of play around with the sizing. But I think a good rule of thumb is 5.5 and 14 inches. So my next step is I'm going to attach this inner seam right here. So I need to know where that goes, and I'm going to mark it with my needle tool. Okay, so I've got a line right here. That's where my wall is going to connect. I'm going to score just right at the wall here because I want to make sure that I've got room for my fingers to get in here. So I'm going to score that, and then I'm going to also score this. Okay, I'm going to use a little bit of water or slip. This obviously was being used by myself to throw a light colored clay. All right, so I'm going to line these up, right? So I'm going to line them up right where I drew that mark there, and then I'm just going to pinch them together. I actually like having the seam show on this, so I'm not going to do a lot of smoothing on it, but you certainly can. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that they stay very well compressed together. All right, next step, I want to form the pocket, right? Some of this forming is just going to happen with me stretching it with my fingers, right? I want to kind of stretch this so that it really opens, okay? So that you've got this nice little pouch. And then I'm going to go ahead and score the top rim and then the bottom edge, and those are going to be my attachment points. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get these guys wet. I'll just do the top first. You can always clean it up later, okay? So let's see if you guys can kind of see how I'm doing this here. Just pinching along the edge there. Make sure it's nice and attached, okay? And then I'm gonna push my hand in there. Right? So I want to kind of push my fingers in so that I've got this really nice opening. When you create a pocket mug, you want to make sure that you have room for shrinkage for your fingers to go in. So if you're making this as a gift for somebody who has really big hands, keep that in mind, right? So I want to make sure that I've got a little bit of wiggle room for my fingers. So I'm going to taper this just a smidge. And the other thing that you can do is you can actually press it in from the inside. If you can kind of see how I'm deforming some of this little shape by just squeezing it gently, you can also do that. Okay, the last step is to attach the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to use the texture on this because why not? score these guys together and kind of stick them together. We'll see if this works. Okay. So, make a little bit of a slab with what I've already textured here, and I'm okay if I lose some of the texture on the bottom. It's no biggie. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'll lay the slab here, and I'm going to lay my mug right on the or set my mug right on the top of it, and I want to just make sure that it is the shape that I want it to be before I do any cutting. Okay, so I will then outline it with my needle tool and bevel that in, cutting a circle all the way around the edge, like that. Okay. So now I'm going to score the bottom here. Score it really well. And I'll do the same here. Alrighty. Whenever you're working with slabs, just be mindful that you do want to let slab work set up a little bit before you start building. That makes slab work way harder if you're working with a really, really soft slab. So the fact that I can kind of hold this upright and it's not slumping or sinking down or deforming too much really works in my favor. So then I can flip this over. I can take my rib and do a little bit of compression around those joints where I connected them. Okay, and then you're just about done. So again, I know that this one looks huge for my hands, right? Because my hands are very, very small. But I have to remember that this is going to shrink in probably almost 1/2 inch. And then as far as finishing, right, little finishing touches, to make this rim a little bit nicer to drink out of, I would use a slightly damp sponge and just wrap it around the rim and kind of curve those edges. Like you can even use your fingers, kind of a little damp finger. Smooth those edges. If you wanted to smooth that inside seam, take a damp paintbrush and go ahead and take care of that on the inside and on the outside. And then I would also do a little bit of cleanup on this part right here, a little pocket. So again, this is the curved opening. You can do the exact same thing with a straight line on your initial rectangle. So, and then before you finish, just do one last check. Does my hand fit in here, right? And do I have a little bit of wiggle room, both up and down and kind of side to side, okay? Making sure these guys are well attached. Okay, so there's a pocket mug.